Hi, in my first video on easy pastel technique, I showed you how to use a printed image onto pastel paper to create a loose picture of a pair of trainers. In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint these apples using the same techniques, but a different method to transfer your image to the pastel paper. We're still going to use the blocking in technique, and I'll show you how to get some detail and how to mix your colours on the paper. But let's jump right in and show you how to get that image onto your pastel paper. In my last video, I showed you how very simply you can take an image of a picture, print it onto a piece of pastel paper, and then using some very simple techniques, block in the picture and then start to use pastels to bring the detail out in your painting. In this video, I'm going to do the same sort of thing, but from a different point of view. So I've sketched out an image of 3 apples on a piece of paper. I'm going to link the shadows together to form the image. I've printed out my picture, and what I'm going to do this time is transfer the image to the paper by simply rubbing over the back with a piece of pastel and then using a pencil fairly lightly, tracing around the shapes that I want. I only want these 3 apples. And then again, we're going to use the same technique to block in the colours, referring back to the image all the time to find the lights and the darks. So that's what we're going to do this time. So it's just another way to tackle a pastel painting. We've got our image printed out and I've turned it upside down. I'm now going to mark the edges of the paper where the image starts on the left-hand side of the apple, and also on the right hand side of the apple. I'm just going to mark the edge of that. So I don't really want to add too much pastel to the paper, as the mess could transfer down onto the paper. I'm just lightly going around the shape of the apple, guessing basically where the apple is on the paper, not caring too much about making the whole of the paper covered in pastel. In fact, the lighter you can do this, the better. I'm using a blue pastel because I find it transfers to the paper quite easily, and also you can rub out the marks after you've created the image. This is quite important because you can also use transfer paper. However, I find it's more difficult to remove those marks from your paper when the image is finished. So now I'm just going to bang off the extra dust on the paper, and we're ready to start transferring that image to our piece of pastel paper. Now our image is safely taped to our pastel paper, I'm going to use a pencil and I'm going to very roughly and lightly go around the outside shapes of the apples. I'm not being too careful to get the shapes completely accurate, as when we block in I'm probably going to go over the outlines anyway, so don't worry too much at this stage about getting the image correct. Just going around the top of the apple now, making a little mark into the apple, adding the stalk. And onto the final apple now. This is the lightest apple in all 3 selection. So again, just very gently going around the image basically, adding in the little stalks. And then finally, an indication of where the shadows are on the picture that we're transferring. But I'll probably change this in the final version of the painting. Onto the painting process now, exciting bit. And I'm going to start by putting in a light blue shadow where the apples are casting a shadow. Moving on to a dark pastel now to add in some of the colours, and also a lighter colour, yellow pastel. These are all colours that will make up the colour of the apple as we work through the painting. Dropping in some warmer reds now, where the shadow area is, and again back into the green pastel, light green pastel, just to add the shapes of the apples. Working those colours down into the shadow area because the shiny surface will reflect the colours of the apple. Quite important to do this. Adding in the stalks of the apple now. I love the stalks of the apple, they're all in different places, which makes a bit of an interest into the image. Now adding some more yellow to the edge of the apple where the light is shining and hitting the apple. Pulling that colour again into the shadow areas just so that you get a bit of unification of colour through the painting. Again, pulling some of that colour back into the shadow area. And this is almost the end of stage 1. So stage 2 of the painting now is to add pastel in a slightly heavier form. I've been quite light up to now, using the yellow stick again to add in the highlights of the apple. Remembering that the apple on the right hand side of the image is the lightest, so adding more yellow to that particular apple. Not going into the shadow areas so much this time, adding more green and the stripes on the apple where the green comes down. I'm doing that in the direction of the apple, not just bringing the pastel down, adding more form to the image at this point. Adding some darker tones now on the side of the apple, again in the form of the apple, not trying to colour in. So here's the final image, and as you can see, the shadows mingle into the apples. It's a lost and found kind of edge. The actual edges of the apples themselves, they work from dark on the left right the way through to the lightest tones on the right hand apple. I'm pleased with this image. I've got some nice dark tones into the shadows. Those dark tones also reflect into the apples themselves, which is what happens in nature if you study the image when you're painting it. So I hope you enjoyed that, and come back for our next video when we'll be using pan pastels to make a cupcake.